What do you seek after? What do you long for in the midst of your trouble, whatever that may be for you, whether it be your finances or something happening in your marriage or family or the what's happening around the world right now or governmental uh, fights and difficulties. Um, what's the one thing that you desire? What's the one thing that you want or hope for? Well, in the midst of David's trouble, he expresses the one thing that he longs for and that he seeks after. And let's discover it as we walk through Psalm 27, the first four verses. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I have asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. Let's walk through these verses one at a time. First, David starts off with this declaration that God, the Lord, Yahweh, I am who I am, is my light and my salvation. In the midst of all his difficulties, God is David's light and salvation. And as we can see down here, these people are all against him. And so, in the midst of that, whom shall I fear? David asked this rhetorical question. And of course, the obvious answer is no one. No one, because the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? No one. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? No one. You see, God is our light, our salvation, and the stronghold of my life. If God is that, whom shall I fear? And of whom shall I be afraid? No one. You see, when here he's giving you the time in which he doesn't fear, that he sees God as his light and salvation. When evildoers, my adversaries and foes, when they assail me to eat up my flesh, it is they who stumble and fall. You see, it feels perhaps to David as if he's stumbling and falling. As you read further down in this psalm, you'll see that he's calling out for God to be his help. But David knows that ultimately what is true is that the evildoers who assail me, ultimately they stumble and fall. And then in verse 3, he says, though an army encamp against me, though war rise against me. And here he's thinking about what's the worst that could happen right now. And what he pictures is everyone is against David and is assailing him, attacking him like an army in the midst of war. And there's lone David in the middle. They've surrounded him. He's got no protection. He's got nowhere to go. But he will be confident and he will not fear. Why? The Lord, Yahweh, is my light, my salvation, my stronghold. Therefore, there's one thing that I have asked of the Lord. Because this is true, there's one thing I have asked of the Lord that I will seek after. And here it is, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Why? To gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire or meditate in his temple, to contemplate, to think about, to consider. So the one thing that he wants is to be in the house of the Lord, in the presence of God. That's his desire. His one thing is to be in the presence of God. And what will he do in the presence of God? He wants to gaze, or the word is to behold, to see the beauty of the Lord, and to meditate, inquire, think about, contemplate the beauty of the Lord. Have you ever thought of God as beautiful? I think we think of him as holy and righteous and gracious and loving. But do we think of him as beautiful? Well, what is beauty? Isn't beauty the perfection of goodness? So thinking about all the attributes of God, his holiness, his righteousness, his graciousness, his love, when you think about each of his attributes and that they are perfect in every way, that makes them beautiful. And what's the one thing David wants to do? He wants to see the beauty of the Lord and to meditate on it, to think about it. How much time do we take thinking about God, his character, who he is? We look to him for help, but how often do we look at him? I encourage you this week to spend some time quietly being still and know that he is God, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his presence.